Every year, over 175 million people migrate around the world in search of a sustainable existence for ourselves and our families.
We are fed up of being displaced from our homelands by free trade agreements and wars of occupation. We are fed up of being made illegal so that our labor can be exploited for super profits to expand this empire.
10,000 people have died on the U.S.-Mexico border since the signing of the North American Free Trade Agreement in 1994.
We've learned that here in the belly of the beast, how dramatically our government and U.S.-based multinational corporations impact migration and influence immigration policies around the world.
Bangladesh was one of the first countries to formally participate in the structural adjustment schemes of the IMF and the World Bank in the 80s. Since these official structural adjustment policies were put in place, 40% of workers in public sector jobs became unemployed due to privatization by multinational corporations. Intensive irrigation programs have led to the drying up of natural wells and arsenic poisoning of the water, which threatens the lives of over 30 million people. The U.S. corporations Pfizer and Ciba-Geigy have taken advantage of unregulated pharmaceutical markets to target adolescents in a campaign to try experimental antidepressants and marketing fertilizers to farmers without acknowledging their side effects.
Why would multinational corporations have the opportunity to go across and deal in free trade, and yet people cannot cross along borderlines in search?
In 1848, when the border came down on the Rio Grande River, half of my family ended up on the U.S. side, and half of my family ended up on the Mexico side. We still feel that division. That is not something that happened long ago that we have forgotten.
The crisis continues. The crisis and terrorism against indigenous people in this country continues. There is 8 tribal nations, indigenous nations in the southern border. Tohono Nation, the Kokopa, the Kumeyaay, the Pasquayaki, Gila River Indian community, the Yavapai Apaches, the Kumeyaay, and from Texas, the Kickapoo. We have problems in crossing the border. We are considered to be aliens in our own country. Our sovereignty is threatened every time we cross the border. We have to say U.S. citizen. But I am citizen of the Pasquayaki tribe.
Mexicans, we come from 2 main communities, right? It's mainly African and indigenous, with some Europeans thrown in. Even when you say Mexican, it blurs how each community is very, very, distinct, individual, unique. For example, people that are coming into the United States right now, or the ones that were hauled in to under miserable conditions, right, for doing the Katrina cleanup, they weren't Mexicans. They were indigenous people coming from Mexico.
You know that people have migrated across the U.S.-Mexico border for thousands of years. But what's different about what's happening now is that in 1994, the U.S. government under the Clinton administration decided to militarize the border with Operation Gatekeeper. The result was that the majority of people crossing the U.S.-Mexico border who had previously crossed through San Isidro, San Diego, El Paso, other parts of South Texas, now were funneled into Arizona, where the most dangerous conditions you could imagine exist in our deserts, very, very treacherous. Bush announced that his Senate bill, his immigration program, which is the bill that died in the Senate yesterday, was going to get an allocation of $4.4 billion right off the bat. No waiting around, no waiting periods. They were going to put that money in border security. Most of it is going to the private sector, the companies that we heard about last night, Halliburton, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, Corrections Corporation of America, companies that are profiting off of the genocide in Iraq and that function along the U.S.-Mexico border. People say in D.C., well, that's the border, we have another reality here, but we are precisely the testing ground for all of the repressive measures that the rest of you all deal with in your local communities in terms of policing and prisons.
the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency holds more inmates a night than Clarion hotels have guests, operates nearly as many vehicles as Greyhound has buses, and flies more people each day than do many small U.S. airlines.
The forces of racism, of hate, of xenophobia will demand more immigration raids, arrests, and deportations of undocumented immigrants.
We in the African American community can no longer look at the struggle against racism as a black-white issue. On the flip side, the immigrant rights movement and immigrant communities must understand the history of the struggle of African Americans for social and economic justice and for civil rights. The South has the largest population of African Americans of any other region in these United States. It also has the poorest African American population of any other region in these United States. I'm told over the last 5 years over a 500% increase in immigration to the South. The only way we can forge a lasting alliance is to challenge each other to understand the history, the culture, and the political makeup of our communities.
The Central Labor Council is working very hard to establish respectful and productive relationships with the organizations of immigrants. It is our objective to work with the Taxi Workers Alliance, groups like the Domestic Workers, and the hundreds of others, and I do mean that, the hundreds of other organizations of the working class.
We need to have some accountability sessions, not only with our Congress people, but with the people who claim to be our spokespeople in DC. And I think it's important to name names. The National Council of La Raza, the National Immigration Forum, CCC Firm. These are the groups that are getting funding to do the negotiations behind closed doors where we're not allowed a seat at the table. It's not just about amendments or this reform or that reform. It's about whether or not we're going to accept this national security state that is growing up around us.
We must make the connections between the detention industry and the prison industrial complex, war profiteering and disaster profiteering.
Special registration, the drug war, 3 strikes, the Patriot Act, the Secure Fence Act, and now the Senate bill.
We must understand that the war on terrorism is a war abroad and a war at home, and that when we say our people are being unfairly incarcerated for the benefit of a few, we mean an American prison population, which is largely citizens of color, the detention industry, and the illegal incarceration of prisoners of war. When we talk about the war at home, we mean the militarization of the border and the use of local police officers as immigration enforcement agents. We are not temporary, disposable, or alien. What we will do is build a movement, continue to build a movement, with our indigenous comrades, with all people of color struggling for liberation, with all LGBTs, GNC, and gender nonconforming people, and with our people at home, wherever that is, for justice, self-determination, an end to imperialism, and sustainable lives which honor all the complexity of our desires and our spirits.